thanking you, John, for joining to our community event here. Although it was very short notice to me and happened to a young Iranian lady, Sadaf, who called me last week. I said, Mayor is going to visit Iranian Plaza, and then after that he wants to meet with the business community. And I said, I'm not having expertise to show supermarket, but I have other things that I can present to the mayor that what our community are doing, and with the kind sponsorship of Mr. Darwish Liberty, who is sponsoring this event. I'm honored to have a mayor here. I know John since, I think, how many years ago you were running for being Premier of Ontario?
10.
10. That was the time I met John in the head table, and we were talking. And although John is a conservative, said, I'm liberal because of Michael. But although I'm liberal, but my judgment, because he's physically conservative, but socially he's a liberal, and that's why I really respect him. And he's a good man to be the mayor of the city like Toronto. Maybe some of us maybe don't know. I personally believe that I have been involved with the provincial and federal political activities, but since the time of Mr. Miller, who was a good friend of mine, I noticed that more important than the province and federal is the city. Issues in the city is our daily issues. We wake up in the morning till end of the night, coming back home, we are facing to the all issues which is related to the city. It's not provincial, it's not federal. But we have, as member of our community, we have less attention to that issue. Decision of a councillor, I'm not even talking a mayor, can change the life and affect millions of the people in that city for now and future. Therefore, it is a big responsibility. We have to have attention. And very important, maybe you don't know, Mayor of Toronto is the highest elected person in Canada, to my opinion, because he's the one who gets 100,000 of votes. Even the Prime Minister doesn't have so many votes, maybe 20 to 30,000, am I right? Therefore, it is the highest elected person who get the number of voting from the public, 3, 4, 500,000. This is very important. And the city of Toronto, for sure, with all this problem we are having, and I'm sure that we see that every day Mr. Tory is facing, and why I really personally respect him, because I see every day in the TV early morning, I don't know, you sleep 4 or 5 hours maybe?
5 hours.
5 hours, that's why I wake up 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and he's in the TV. So I'm older than him, 6 years, but still he is younger than me. So 5 o'clock he's in the TV. And really he's hardworking, honest, well educated, and family man, to my opinion, is very, very important. And the city of Toronto needs a person like John. That's why we are supporting you, John. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. It's very kind. Well, first of all, Ahmed, may I thank you for your kind words, but also for, together with Fred, for organizing this gathering. And I think some of you have also, which you didn't have to do, but you've, I think, been kind enough to contribute financially. But most importantly, you've contributed your time. And as I've gone around the room, I have found, well, I found two things, one of which is no surprise to me at all. This community, which I've got to know very well over the years, thanks to the introduction of many people like Ahmed and Fred and I'll say Reza Maridi and others. I say it all the time because I mean it. And I say it, by the way, to lots of people who are not part of this community. I said it to, I met in Kensington Market last week 2 people who lived here and then a sister of the woman who was visiting from Iran. And I said, well, when are they going to convince you to move here? And they said they were working on it. But I said to her, I want to tell you that from our standpoint as people, I've lived my entire life in Toronto, there is not a more accomplished, there is not a nicer, more contributing, positive community that I've encountered in all of my work, both as a business leader, now as a politician, as a community servant and volunteer, than this community. And what is interesting about it is not only is it consist of people who are nice people and good citizens, but incredibly accomplished people. I went to something not long ago. Oh, it wasn't something I went to. I was out doing the supermarket business you were talking about at the time of Nowruz. And I was up visiting the supermarkets right up just south of here on Yonge Street. And I kept meeting people, and I probably met, I don't know, 100 people. I swear to you, 86 of them were engineers. I mean, but you know, and I say that in a complimentary manner because what an extraordinary thing. And I know many of them left the country because they couldn't do what they wanted to do in terms of fulfilling their own expectations and making use of the extraordinary training they've received. But it's a compliment to them, and frankly, it's a compliment to the education system in Iran that those people would have come here, and we're delighted that they came, and I hope many more will come after them, just like I was saying to this young woman. But it's just a community that I honestly, God, I talk about you all the time because it is a community of extraordinary accomplishment and just adding, you know, incredibly to the well-being of this country and of this city. Two examples of that as well in the political realm are Ali, who is here, and Michael. They happen to be from different parties, but you know what? What they are, again, is just public servants in the true sense of the word. Ali, I see, as I said earlier on, he's been around a bit longer than Michael, so I see him, I said, more often than I see my wife. And I do. I see him, but he is the epitome, I just tell you, of somebody who's out at every community event, whether it's in his own community or in the broader city of Toronto, if it matters. He was there. We were together last at the Korean Festival. Interestingly enough, because the Persian community is kind of centered around Mel Lastman Square, and it's one of the places where they have a lot of their own events, at the Korean Harvest Festival, it's one of the great things about that event, just on Sunday night, is how many Persian, Canadians, Iranian Canadians were at Mel Lastman Square celebrating Korean Harvest Festival. And to me, that's the essence of Canadian, is that you celebrate each other's festivals and you get to know about each other's background and cultures, and everybody respects and embraces each other, but there's no better public representative. And Michael, I met before he got elected, and he, I think, is going to fit into the same category. He will be somebody that all of us will be proud of as somebody who's a young person that's decided to devote a very important part of his life to public service. And I think that's crucially important. I want to pay just brief tribute to one more person, and that is Fred himself. I first met Fred probably the same time as I met you, maybe 10 years ago or so when I was in provincial politics. And I don't think a lot of people in Toronto, because he's kept a pretty low profile, know of what he has accomplished in terms of a complex even like this. I'll admit, even I have driven past this complex quite a few times on the way up Yonge Street or the way down Yonge Street, and I didn't focus on the fact that it was all one complex, first of all, that it's an incredible mixed-use complex with a lot of different successful elements, retail, hotel, residential, commercial, and that a lot of it is his own, he and his team, he'd be the first to say, brainchild, and I just want to commend him on his entrepreneurship, as is the case with so many of you in this room. And I guess, if there's one thing that I'm trying to do, there's really two that I'm trying to do. The first thing I set out to try to do when I got elected, and I said I would try to do this, and I hope I've succeeded to a degree, you can't achieve perfection, is to restore the functionality of the city government in terms of people's respect for the office of mayor, respect for the person who is mayor, and that doesn't mean you agree with me all the time, but it means you at least respect that I'm trying to do the right thing. That manifested itself as well in better relationships with the city council, because that's a key in our system to make it work. There are no parties there, and notwithstanding you might have referred to me as a small c conservative, I think of myself as a progressive small p, small c. I don't belong to a political party anymore, because it's best, if you're going to be the mayor of Toronto, that you don't belong to a party, because you can then genuinely serve all the people and have all the people help you with your elections, and that's what I'm very proud to be able to say that I can do. But you have to get along with the council, and they come from all different backgrounds too. And then the third thing, and by far the most important in terms of how the government functions, is that you have good relationships with the other governments. And when I got elected mayor, Stephen Harper was the Prime Minister and Kathleen Wynne was the Premier. At the end of my term, it will be Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister and Doug Ford as Premier. And I will just tell you that while those relationships are all different, and the people are different, obviously, as I'm different to them, that I will make it a priority, as I have the entire 4 years if I'm re-elected, to make sure I have a solid, sound relationship with those people, because we're partners in building a great city. We have to be partners. There is no way around that. I wouldn't want it to be otherwise. And when Fred talks about the fact we should have spent 8 times as much, I think he said, on public transit, he may be right. But the bottom line is it's not going to go up by 5 billion or 10 billion or any amount that he thinks we should be investing if we don't work together on that, on where the transit should be and how it's paid for and when it gets built. This is a partnership. And I want to just tell you that people like Ali and people like Michael and their two leaders, Prime Minister Trudeau and Premier Ford, they are indispensable to the growth and the success of Toronto. They're indispensable. Toronto cannot grow and prosper on its own. It has to grow and prosper in partnership. And so when you read of, one of my competitors who talks about how they want to have a huge kind of knock them down, drag them out, fight with Doug Ford every day of the week, and that's the kind of relationship that should exist between Toronto and Ontario, I would say, no, that's not right. You have to stand up for Toronto, and I'm not afraid to speak up when things are not right, and I don't think, quite frankly, the way the change in the composition of the City Council took place was right in terms of its process. And I think we should have had a discussion about how big the council should be, and there should have been a discussion involving the public. But at the end of the day, are you saying I'm going to solely form my judgment as to the kind of relationship we'll have on transit and housing and community safety based on that? No, I can't afford to. The people don't want me to do that. They want me to make sure I have a good overall relationship where I stand up for Toronto when that's necessary, but that I also understand that I have to work with these other governments from time to time. The other thing that I think is fundamental beyond that way of doing this job is the prosperity of Toronto. I think everything begins and ends with the ability to create wealth here so that we have that wealth to fairly tax and to redistribute to transit or to helping people who are less fortunate or to a host of other things that governments do. And I think you're right, the city government is the one that is closest to people and delivering services that they're most likely to pick up the phone if they miss it for a day, whatever it is. If you're not delivering clean, safe water, if you're not picking up the garbage, if you're not providing parks and recreation, and on the list could go, you call City Hall. And our ability to deliver those services is completely dependent upon the city itself being successful. And that means a couple of things. It means, first of all, that people still want to come and live and invest in the city. And they have to invest in job creation and in businesses, but they also have to be prepared to invest in building new commercial buildings and new residential buildings and new retail and so on. And a lot of you are involved in that business. And I see it as my job to make sure not only that we remain an attractive place. And what does that mean? Well, it means it's a city that's properly served by public transit. It means a city that has a range of housing so that your employees, who may be in mid-income jobs, can afford to live in the city in affordable rental housing, because right now that's, as the city becomes more successful, becoming very challenging for us. And that is not only a social problem, if we feel we're sort of pushing out inadvertently middle class and middle income Torontonians, it's an economic problem, because the people you need to work in your businesses who may be in jobs that earn that middle income may be gone if they have to go and live somewhere else. It's our job to make sure they have adequate parks and recreation and so on, because as increasing numbers of people live in condominiums, they don't have a backyard and a front yard. So they need the kinds of things that we provide for them to make sure their families can have a life that is a healthy life that is good for families. And they need a city that's affordable from the standpoint of our taxation levels. Those are all things that are taken into account by you in making decisions. And we were having some discussions about things that may be pushing people away from Toronto, because that happens in a city that's growing rapidly. Things get more expensive, land gets more expensive, and there are pressures that cause people to say, you know what, maybe I'll go somewhere else. It's my job to keep the city in such a way that people maybe will want to be other places as well, but they want to stay here too. They want to come here and live here. They want to work here. They want to build things here. They want to invest here. And that speaks to the process of government as well. And one of the things I think we have a long way to go on is improving the process for people who want to invest in Toronto. I've certainly identified it as a problem. So for example, whereas we had more than 20 of our own real estate departments when I became mayor, today we've consolidated all of that into one real estate organization. And that is so that we can do business with you in forming partnerships and so on, and making strategic use of the land, whereas before somebody would say, well, that's my land, I'm the TTC. That's my land, I'm the police. That's my land, I'm the fire department. I think a lot of that public land has to be the subject of partnerships we form with you to develop affordable housing, to develop things around the transit where it makes sense to have development so people can walk out the front door of their building, whether it's their office building or their house, and get on the transit and go somewhere, as opposed to building things much further afield. And so I recognize that it's part of my job to continue to modernize the government. We even talked today about making better use of our fiber assets that we have, and there's a company represented in here, not not unknown to our host today, that actually can help me with that. And those are the kinds of things that I want to pursue. So I'll just finish on this note. If those are the principal priorities I have, to make sure the government functions better and to make sure it's an attractive place to live and to invest through the building of transit, the ramping up of our efforts on affordable housing, and many other things that make this an attractive city to invest in and to live in, more importantly, then what is the job I have to do in the coming years? It is to carry on with a lot of what I've been doing. Address the transit plan. We got a transit plan developed. We got it approved by the City Council. That is no mean feat, I assure you, in a council of 45 people. We got it funded largely by the other two governments. They funded it to the tune of $9 billion, with the current Ontario government saying they're going to invest even more in transit, which will make Fred very happy. But the hardest part is, you know in business, it's one thing to develop a plan. It's another thing to go to the board of directors or the shareholders or wherever and get it approved. It's a third thing to get it financed by the bank or the shareholders. But the hardest part then is actually executing the plan, building the building, building the factory, building the transit plan. I promise you in this election, there's going to be a proposal put forward by my principal opponent who is going to say, let's change that plan around. Let's just take a couple of things out of it and put some new things in. I am telling you, if we go down that road, we'll be right back to where Toronto has been for years and years, which is that we will have no plan. We will proceed ahead with nothing because we'll be busy arguing with all the other governments and ourselves about what it is we should be doing. I want to stick to the plan we've got approved and we've got financed and build the transit. On housing, I've talked about ramping up our production so that it is substantially in excess of what we're doing now, because we need to do it, and that's all going to be done in partnership with the private sector, not government. We don't build and operate housing well. You do. Those of you who are involved in that. You've got the ingenuity, you've got the ideas, you've got the ways to do it that are going to be good for us, but we have to do it together. We're going to continue to attract jobs and investment, and the last thing we're going to do is keep the city affordable, and my biggest job in doing that is to keep taxes low. I believe that the commitment that I made 4 years ago to keep property and commercial tax increases at or below the rate of inflation has been done. It has been done successfully. It has been done not at the expense of investing in the city. We've done all kinds of things. Record amounts put into transit, record amounts into the library system, record amounts into housing, even though we kept tax increases at or below the rate of inflation. And so I believe we have to continue with that, whereas again, you will hear my opponent saying, she's already said this many times in the past, she put out a chart, for example, which you'll see that says New York has 17 local taxes and Toronto only has 3. Sort of, what's wrong with us? And I'm saying, well, nothing's wrong with us. There is no competition to see who can have the most local taxes. We're actually trying to keep the city affordable for residents, for investors, and for others, because otherwise they will go somewhere else, or they just won't be able to afford to live here. So you'll have my commitment to continue to keep the city affordable. And I think if we do those kinds of things, Toronto has enough, what's the word I'm looking for, enough kind of organic appeal around the world that people will continue to come here from all over the world because they know of our way of life, they know of our approach to these things, they know of the kind of city it is. It's leadership that works, it's a city that works, and we just have to keep it that way. It's not perfect. So I will now stop and see if there are some questions that you have for me. We'll just do that for a few minutes until Ahmed gives me the hook. But again, I thank you so much for coming. And what I thank you for more than coming today, I just thank you for, if I added up in this room, all the jobs and opportunities that are created for people from across this city and from York region and elsewhere, it would be an incredible number, I'm sure. And many of you have come from elsewhere in the course of your lives, and you've come here to enrich our country immeasurably and our city. And I just say thank you for that, and just keep doing what you're doing, because it is one of the reasons why Toronto is on the map worldwide these days as the place to come to live and to invest, and we just want to keep it that way for all the time to come. Who has a question or a comment?
I have one.
Yes.
We live in Richmond Hill and work in Richmond. The problem that we have, as Fred says, is the public transit and public transportation, in particular the metro system. We have extreme difficulty hiring people from other parts of Toronto, and we are really forced to hire people that are locally living in Richmond Hill or the vicinity of Richmond Hill, and it makes our job extremely difficult. What are the plans for the transit system, in particular Finch North and the metro?
Well,
it will facilitate our jobs by far more than what we have now.
We have come to recognize recently, and when I say we, I think it's the province, the federal government, and the city governments, plural, York Region, Toronto have realized that we can no longer afford to operate our transit system on the basis that it was operated before, which was that you never had any higher order transit line like a subway that crossed regional boundaries, that you have to start thinking about how GO train service is provided on the basis that it's a region where people need to move around to work and to live, and on the basis of even just the integration of bus service. As you well know, now it's not even easy to take a bus, from one municipality, say York Region, to Toronto and use the subway without having to pay either more or pay twice. And so what we're working on is the following. The first project that was opened that set the precedent, and it's now open up into York Region, is the University Spadina Vaughan subway. The second project that is in planning now, and there's money put in by all three governments to do the planning, is the Yonge Street subway extension north of Finch up to Highway 7. I will say to you, I have said as the Mayor of Toronto, and you'll understand the sensibility of this, that as long as the Yonge Street subway is overcrowded, I can't in good conscience allow that subway extension to proceed until we also build the relief line downtown that will relieve the pressure that's mostly at Yonge and Bloor. The Yonge Street subway is already overcrowded. They will be helped by the new train control system, which will increase capacity by 20%. But the main thing we have to do is build that relief line. So what's happening is those two projects, the relief line and the Yonge Street North Extension, are on the same timetable, so they can open at the same time. And both are the subject of hundreds of millions of dollars of planning and design work that is being done now with a view to keep them moving forward. But as you know, subway projects take a long time. They usually take about 10 years. But at least we finally started the process of doing that work. The third thing that I think people underestimate that fits into the category of what you talked about is SmartTrack. SmartTrack was never designed to start at Steeles Avenue and go downtown. It was designed deliberately to start in Markham. Stouffville, actually, is the farthest place it'll go. Because, why did we do that? Because there's a huge concentration of jobs in Markham, and because people told us exactly what you said, which is that we can't hire people in Markham who want to live in downtown Toronto. They just want to live there because it's where the action is. A lot of the smart young people, as you know, want to live downtown. And they will say, I'm not going to work in Markham, it's too far, I can't get there properly on transit. When SmartTrack opens in 2023, 2024, which I know seems a long way away, but it's not that far away, people will be able to get on that train at Union Station or Liberty Village, where they want to live, and ride the train right to Stouffville. And they'll be able to do it for the same price as riding the TTC. That's assuming that Michael is successful in convincing his government that they should go along with something that I think the previous government very wisely did, which is to say that they would finance a fare on GO and on the TTC that's the same fare. So if you're traveling inside Toronto, it's $3 and within 10 kilometers. So I would just say to you that hope is on the way for what you talked about. We're going to have the Yonge Street subway extended north. We have the Vaughan subway already there, and we have SmartTrack going to Stouffville. So you'll have 3 rapid transit lines that will move people back and forth. And it's not all one way. Some of those people will go to work downtown. People always think of it that way. I think a lot of them are going to come the other way and come to work here because there's a lot of exciting things going on here. But we're on to that, and we're on to integrating the transit systems, especially when it comes to how much you pay. Because people don't care what the color of the bus is. They don't care where the boundary is between Toronto and York Region. They don't care. They don't even know where it is. They just care they can get on a train or a bus and go to work and come home, and that it's simple for them and that it's affordable for them. And that's what we're trying to do now with all the different things we're doing.
Thank you. I just have one more question, if you don't mind. Have you seen 404 North after 7 o'clock coming down from Schofield? It's just like a car parking lot.
No, I know. And that's because of, again, all the people that are coming. What's interesting about the 404 and the Parkway and the Gardiner Expressway is now both times of the day the traffic is busy going both ways. Because there are as many people going to Mississauga to work or going to Markham to work as there are going the other way. And so that's why it is so important. And I say to people all the time, because people raise traffic with me and say it's a terrible problem, and I say yes, and they say, what have you done about it? And I'll tell them a whole list of things we've done. But with the city growing as fast as it is, there are more people coming all the time, and some of them have cars. And until we have proper transit, including the Yonge North Extension, SmartTrack, the downtown relief line, et cetera, all the different projects, until those are built and people are riding on them, they don't have any alternative but to drive their car. And so we have to build the transit, and that's why I think Fred says we got to build more. He's right. If we had the money, we should build more so that we can say to people, you do not have to use your car. We have a much cheaper, much more environmentally friendly, much more effective way to get to work, and it's faster. And so that's why we have to build this transit.
Thank you.
take a couple of more, and then we'll get back to just chatting one-on-one. Who else has a question or comment? Yes, Fred. Fred.
But the affordable housing,
Yes.
usually any prime minister be elected or during election time, and the premier, well, not one of them, at least all of them, in the last few elections that I remember here in this country, I'm almost 40 years in this city. And they're coming and they're saying, okay, we have the affordable housing. But affordable housing after the war, if you remember, maybe you know that, in the north part of the city, Etobicoke, Fairview Mall area, so many areas, lots of apartment building has been built, all rental. How built it? Because at that time, no development charges, no park levy, no school levy, no. But now everything is there. We just having is about $150 in 105 at least. The cost of those things, is about $150 per square foot. If those kind of money were paid by the province or by federal government, municipality can produce lots of things by private sector. It has been done, 50 years ago. It can be done now. And the private sector is a tool that they can provide that affordable housing.
So Fred, what we're doing is exactly what you're talking about, and we had a program that we started this year, and it proved to be successful, but on a smaller scale, and it needs to be scaled up. It was called the Open Doors program, and it was meant to encourage the private sector to build affordable housing as part of the developments that they would do overall. As you know, there now is something called inclusionary zoning, which will actually make that compulsory, that there be a certain percentage of affordable housing in developments. But what we did that worked, and it speaks exactly to what you're talking about, is we did three things. We said first and foremost, we're going to put up public land. And it's one of the reasons why it was necessary for us to gather all the land we had into one place so that we could say, for example, I'll give you an example, it's not that close to here, but at Islington and Bloor, where 3 of the 4 corners have been developed with office buildings and whatnot, there's one corner that presently consists of a TTC yard where they move buses around and do things like that. They may need to do that at that particular place, I don't know, but the bottom line is above that, there's nothing at the moment. There's just a yard there where they move buses around. We have plenty of fire departments, for example, that are in very strategic locations on main streets because you have to have fire departments, fire halls all over the place. There's nothing above them. There's just a 2-story building with a garage in the bottom. There is no reason why that fire department couldn't be relocated inside a building that includes affordable rental housing using our land. So one of the things we're doing is putting up public land to say to the private sector, okay, we'll give you the land for $1 a year, but you have to come here and build a building that has a certain percentage of affordable housing, and in return for that. The other government, the federal government in particular, is also putting up money. So we can say, not only can we give land, we can forgive development charges, or we can defer taxes or forgive taxes, or we can put in cash. And so, because we know that the private sector is not going to come along and just build affordable housing because it makes them feel better. We need to make sure that we can make it an attractive proposition for them so that we can achieve both the social and economic goals of having more people living in affordable rental housing. So I'm hoping by ramping up the target substantially for the next 4 years. And by the way, I've set a target of 40,000 units essentially over the next 10 or 11 years. My opponent says she can do 100,000 units. I don't know how many people in here in the development business would tell me it is possible, given the trades, given the planning process, given everything, to do 100,000 units in 10 years. Everybody tells me it's not possible. I don't believe, I guess because I came from business, unlike her, I came from business, and I believe what you do is you set out a realistic target you can achieve. Where did my target come from? It came from talking to the industry and talking to the city staff, and I said, what's the maximum number of units you think we could achieve over a 10-year basis? And they said 30,000. I actually persuaded them to allow me to increase it to 40,000 because I wanted to be a bit more ambitious. If I thought they ever could go anywhere near 100,000, I would have had that conversation with them, but they told me that kind of number was just not possible. Not because we're chicken or because we're lazy, it's because it's just not practical. So I picked a number of 40,000, which I believe is going to be great for us to achieve. If we can do better, then let's do it. But 40,000 is the number that I picked for that reason. Who else has one more maybe? Yes, sir.
I recently came back from the Netherlands, and I was surprised to see a 10-story building with a fire station on the first floor. It was newly built. And then I think of the corner of York Mills and Bayview, where there's a fire station, and the land's quite valuable there. Has the city thought of any initiatives where you could build over or, you know, put a new building in place where you sell the air rights and incorporate fire station, whatever, in there to take advantage of that property and intensify housing in the neighborhood?
Yes, we have, and I'll be honest with you, one of the things that really caused me to move quickly to create this new organization that put all the real estate that's owned by the city into one place was because I read the fire department's master plan. And when the first year I was mayor, probably the first month I was mayor, and their master plan is kind of like a business plan they have for themselves. And one of the things they said in there is, we're going to take our land in all these fire halls, and there's many like that. I'm familiar with that when it has a particularly big piece of land on a very sort of attractive corner. We're going to take all of our land, and what we're going to do is we're going to allow for development of that piece of land, and we're going to get a new fire hall in the bottom. There's no reason you can't do that. And then we're going to keep the money to buy new trucks and new this and new that. I knew that the amount of money they'd get from developing 3 of those buildings was going to be way more than they needed to buy new equipment for the next 25 years. And what they were sort of saying is, this is our land, the fire department, and we're going to keep the money. And so I thought to myself, no, that's not right. We have to make sure it is our land in the much broader sense of saying that that land should be redeveloped. Not that particular one, but those pieces of property where appropriate should be developed, whether it's for a 4-story or a 12-story or a townhouse, whatever, and a new fire hall, and that the money is then available for broader public purposes than just investing in the fire service. And I'm happy to have them keep a portion of it since it's land they've been using. So the whole idea of this bringing together all the real estate is to take not just fire hall, but TTC lands, green P parking lots. Think of the number of green P parking lots we have that we own all across the city in places where you could easily have something there, have a parking lot, you know, underground or whatever, but also have above the ground some housing for people. So I can just tell you that's exactly what we're going to do over the next number of years, because they're not making any more land in Toronto last time I checked. So we have to take the land we already own and strategically maximize the use of that land, not because the police department says you can't, or the TTC says you can't, or the fire department says it's ours, but because we view it as a collective asset that we have that should be deployed in the best way strategically for the broadest public interest. So the answer to your question is yes, that's exactly what we're going to do. Final question goes to Ahmed because he put you all together.
Related to the power of mayor, is there going to be any changes to increase the power of the mayor?
I don't know. The question about the power of the mayor. The person who first talked about this actually was Premier Ford. And he talked about it in his book that he wrote, and he talked about it afterwards and said the mayor of Toronto and other mayors should be a more powerful position because it allows you to get more done. I came out and later said I thought that would be a good idea. I wasn't seeking more powers for the sake of saying we had them. I just felt that it could lead to more efficient government and would really match the responsibility, the power of the office with the accountability that I have. As you might have noticed now, not different than being a CEO of a company. If you're CEO of a company, everybody turns to you and says, well, what about this, no matter what the problem is, even if you had nothing to do with it. And I'm not complaining about that. Everybody comes to me as the mayor and says, what about transit? What about traffic? What about, you know, this or that? And some of which I have very little direct control over. In fact, very few things do I have direct control to say, well, fix it this way or do that. And so I think to allow the mayor to be more involved in setting the direction and including the budget, subject to some veto that the council could have if a strong majority of them said, no, you're not doing the right thing, I think would be a step forward. And I've only said in response to the Premier having raised it that I'd be interested in discussing it because I think it could lead to better government for the City of Toronto. But as of the moment, it's not something he's talked to me about specifically, and I'm sure that may come up as a discussion down the road, and I will have that discussion with him. But if you said to me, I have to get elected this time around, knowing the rules won't change for the next 4 years, I'd say that's fine. I'll deal with the rules. We've got a lot done the last 4 years without having a powerful mayor system, and we will get lots done for the next 4 years if that's what the rules are, because my job is to get things done, not to fuss, for hours at a time about what the powers of the office are. You will get the last word, sir.
One more.
Yeah.
You talk about transportation, you talk about real estate, everything. How about safety? Strand is also trying to get into
Community safety?
What is the real plan for the safety? Because everybody wants to lead this safe city.
Yeah. First of all, I want to say something I often say, and people are critical of me for saying it, but it's just the truth. I only speak the truth about this, and the facts bear me out. This is still, while we're having some challenges this year, this is still a very safe city. It is still one of the safest cities in the world. It is the safest big city in North America. We've had some challenges this year. One of the reasons the city overall is still safe is because the challenges are in isolated areas of the city, and that's not to say it makes them any smaller or less concerning, but they're in isolated areas of the city. Most of those challenges in terms of the level of violent activity we've seen are related to gangs, most of it. And so we have to get at those gangs, and I think there's three things that we're trying to do right now in order to make sure we try and address the problems where they exist and keep the city overall safe. Number one, in no particular order, number one is to supply more resources to the police. And so with the help of the Government of Ontario, we are putting a substantial additional investments into the police, and not just police officers, but also technology. Because fighting crime is different than it was 25 years ago, and a lot of it, if you think about how they can keep track of the activities of the gangs through social media, you need people who are expert at getting that information off the social media and picking it up in the context of gang activity, just to cite one example. And I'm not an expert on this myself by any means. So both of those two governments, and we've made application to the federal government, and I've had assurances from the Prime Minister and from Minister Blair, and I'm sure with the support of people like Ali, that we've made application to get some funds that have been set aside for this purpose in the federal government, and we've applied for that, some of that will go to the police as well. The second thing we're doing is we are pressing to get some of the laws changed, because I think some of the laws right now are just not adequate to properly protect in 2018 public safety. The laws that I talk about most frequently are the bail laws, because the bail laws right now repeatedly let people who are repeat offenders back out while they're awaiting trial. So what will happen is you'll get charged with a gun offense, and you will be awaiting trial on that, and you go back out and get charged again. And that's the time to me when it's the second time when they should say, terribly sorry, you are not getting out. You're going to stay in jail till your trial. And if you're found innocent, that's unfortunate, but we've had to keep you in because twice you got charged with gun offenses and you violated your bail conditions by even going near a gun after you got out on bail. So we're having good cooperation and discussions. We're having both with the federal and provincial governments about ways to tighten up the bail. The other is the gun laws, which you've seen in the newspapers today, is under active consideration. And I commend the Government of Canada for the fact that at the invitation of myself as Mayor of Toronto, but also the Mayor of Montreal, they're at least looking at the question of answering the question that I put all the time, which is, if you live in the city of Toronto, why do you need to have a handgun? And my answer is, you don't, unless you're a police officer. So to me, we should be looking at laws that really tighten that up even further. And then the third category, which I think is the one that is really important in the long term. And this is, again, where we're in good partnerships with the federal government. Even this summer, they did some wonderful things through, what's it called, Ali? The Canada Youth Works or Canada Summer Jobs Program? And the province, too. We've got to invest in the neighborhoods where the problems are most prevalent, because they tend to be neighborhoods where also the income levels are the lowest, the school dropout rate is the highest, the single-parent families are the highest, the housing is in often the poorest condition, and we have to invest in those neighborhoods, because what is happening is, I've made the expression before, nobody is born bad. No child that comes out of the womb at 9 months is born bad. It is circumstances that cause them sometimes to go off on a fork in their life that is a fork we would not want to see them do. And I think if we invest in these kids in particular when they're young and have positive activities for them, support for them to stay in school, if you think about it, a lot of parents can't help their kids with their homework, either because there may be a language barrier, there may be a lack of educational attainment by the parents, and so those kids start to struggle in school and then they drop out, and once they've dropped out, then that's when they're going to be prey to the gangs. And so if we help them with their homework, if we create positive activities for them after school, whether it's music or sports or robotics or you name it, then we are going to have a much better chance of keeping those kids far away from gang and gun activity. And that's why we have such a strong partnership, which I think is going to get stronger, because again, the federal government for sure has set aside millions of dollars for additional community investment, which we've applied for just to get Toronto's share. And we're going to invest in a lot more of those programs that keep the kids away from gangs and violence. And I think if we do those three things, support the police, tighten up some of the laws, and invest in kids and families, we will have a much better chance of making sure that we keep the level of violence hopefully to zero. But I mean, in a big city, you want to keep it down as low as you can. And this year has been very challenging in that regard. But I do repeat what I said at the beginning. It is still a safe city. The job we have is to keep it that way. Well, again, I'll say thank you, Ahmed, for...
Just an observation, you're saying we have to invest in our children and in the low-income children. It's all over the papers these days that cutting all the social assistance programs like music for underprivileged children, after school activity, all the funding. It was in the paper today. The mother of the 2 kids who got shot in the park had a big, huge rally about this, that the music funding for after school for specific area has been cut by Premier Ford.
Is Michael still, yeah, I want to be fair about that. What in fact happened was that an increase in the funding for next year was actually canceled for now. I always live on the basis that if people speak up, including yourself and the mother, Stacey King, of the 2 girls and so on, that the government will look at that and say, you know what, that actually is a very good investment. And you don't look at it as an investment, but if you look at it from the standpoint of money, $500,000 going into that program that might keep 10 kids from getting into a bad life is worth way more than $500,000 for those people and for the community at large. And so I will just say to you that I'm not familiar with all the aspects of why they canceled that particular planned increase in funding. But I think you're right. We all have to stand up and say these are good programs that produce significant benefits for the community and for these people, for the kids, and for their parents, and for the neighborhoods. And so you're right. I mean, those programs need to be expanded, not contracted. And so I'm certainly speaking up. I was asked about it on radio this morning and said, these kinds of programs are good. They work, and we've got to keep funding them. So you're up. But people have to speak up. It isn't just me that has to speak up. It's people. Thank you very much, Alan, and thank you all very much.